And for many, it is going to be a blustery day. Strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here. Quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland. Some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast, it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
So welcome to another brilliant show. We're back here at the Golden Diamond Club here in Ashfield, the award-winning Golden Diamond. And we've got a very special guest on tonight. That's former Cabinet Minister Edwina Currie. Also, our lefts at the bar are Matthew Larser. He's up in Ashfield again. We've got Lisa McKenzie and trade unionist Andy MacDonald. And Emily Barley will tell her heartbreaking story about the loss of her child at Barnsley Hospital. But first, let's go to the news.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Poland says a Russian missile likely entered its airspace. According to the head of the Polish armed forces, both Poland and NATO's radar systems spotted an unidentified aerial object over the country's territory. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the military alliance stands in solidarity with Poland and that it remains vigilant. It's understood groups of soldiers are performing on-the-ground verification of the missile's flight path. Here in the UK, the government has promised to send around 200 air defence missiles to Ukraine after Russia launched a massive air attack overnight. It comes as Rishi Sunak condemned the Russian president for the latest bombardment, saying Putin will stop at nothing to eradicate freedom and democracy. Officials say 31 civilians have been killed and at least 120 injured following a series of attacks on critical infrastructure and military facilities. One person has died in Scotland following an outbreak of E. coli. It's after the UK Health Security Agency confirmed it's currently investigating 30 cases across England and Scotland to identify any potential links to a brand of cheese. The Food Standards Agency has announced a precautionary recall of 4 products from Mrs. Kirkham's Lancashire cheese because of possible E. coli contamination. The family of a man who was killed while trying to save a stranger in Sheffield says the tragic circumstances show the sort of man he was. Chris Marriott went to the aid of an unconscious woman when she was hit by a car which had ploughed into a crowd of people on Wednesday. She's in a life-threatening condition in hospital. A 23-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder and remains in custody, while a 55-year-old has been released on bail. Witness Tarek Naily says people were fighting in the street beforehand.
I found a lot of people gathering around and screaming, and a car crashed into the sign next door, and a lot of fighting over there. I think 6-7 people fighting each other opposite side. And there is one guy in his 20s, his face is full of blood, and one woman lying down beside.
A British woman and her son have died after an avalanche swept through the French Alps. The 54-year-old and her 22-year-old son were skiing with family on Mont Blanc when the disaster occurred. A search and rescue mission involving around 20 emergency workers lasted 5 hours. Authorities say another person, believed to be an instructor, escaped with minor injuries. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Lee Anderson's Real World.
I'm delighted to be joined tonight with Edwina Currie, former Cabinet Minister. Back in the day, Edwina, things have changed over the years. I mean, you went into politics, what, 30-odd years ago? If you was around today, a little bit younger, would you, put your hat in the ring and stand for Parliament again?
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so, because in the end, if you want to get things done, if you want to get things changed, if you want to help people like yourself or people in an area where you're living, then politics is the way to do it, and being in government is the way to do it. I was very lucky to have that opportunity. I was able to do that. And it was fascinating, it was interesting. Every day's different. I could never work in an office. I could never do a normal job. But politics for me was wonderful. But back in the day, Edwina, I suppose it was more of a man's world in the House of Commons. Look around today, it's about 30% of the people in the chamber that are women. And I suppose it's more accessible now for women to get into politics. How difficult was it back in the day for a woman to get into the House of Commons? Well, imagine if you were one of 23 blokes in a house of over 600 women. You might feel a little outnumbered, mightn't you? Yeah. You might enjoy it, but nonetheless, you would feel that's really strange. And that's how it was for us. The year I got elected first time was 83, which was Margaret Thatcher's second big result. It was after the Falklands War, and that was when we had a huge majority. And even so, we had 23 women in the House. We had 13 Tories and 10 Labour, and none of the others, the Liberals or any of the others, had any women at all. Now, I know we had the Prime Minister, but even so, it did feel odd. On the other hand, I've been involved in politics for a long time. I've been helping to run the city of Birmingham. I come from Liverpool, and I was used to being, the only woman in the room, or the only woman in the room who wasn't going to do the washing up, you know what I mean? And that meant that I would sit at the table and I would argue and I would talk, and I would find myself still in the debate with the men long after everybody else had gone. Well, it's great to have you, Edwina, but we've also got some other people in the room tonight. We've got our lefts in the corner. Well, I say lefts.
We've got Lisa McKenzie, she's an anarchist. We've got Andy MacDonald, who's a trade unionist, and Matthew Larzer, he's going to talk about 13 years of Tory rule. Thanks, guys, for coming. I think what we're going to talk about now, women in politics, Edwina. Do you think it's right that political parties have all women shortlists?
No, I don't, and I've always thought it was wrong. And I'll tell you for why, because people who have felt discriminated against, as women did, should never, ever practice discrimination against anybody else, which is what an all-women shortlist is. So it's far better to do what I think David Cameron did originally when he was in opposition. He was opposition leader. He was trying to get more women into the Conservative side. And what he said was, when you do a selection committee, and I've sat on loads of them, you must have equal numbers of men and women candidates coming forward. So that means you've got to make the effort to get more women or more underrepresented groups. And that's the way to do it, because then you're nurturing people, you're encouraging, you're tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, oh, I hear what you say. What a great... Have you ever thought of standing for Parliament?
I can see Matthew Larzer, he's staring into space over there. Over to you, Matthew.
No, I'm afraid, Edwina is a great pioneer in politics and a great example for people to get, for women to get involved. But all women shortlists have their place. They are the reason why the Labour Parliamentary Party is 50-50, and hopefully they will, over time, won't be needed. But at the moment, they had their place.
Yeah, but the trouble is, of course, the standard problem with this is, if, as a woman, you get through the list and you're only competing against other women, then you're not competing against all comers. And, with the greatest possible respect, I think this is proven by the fact that a heck of a lot of the women you've got in the Labour Party are absolutely useless.
Oh, dear.
Well, I certainly disagree with that.
Over to you, Lisa.
Well, look, I actually agree with you. I don't think there should be all women shortlists, just because I think for us, the party political system is the problem. So you might get an all-woman shortlist, but every one of them is sort of a shoe-in, or at least one of them is a shoe-in that the political party want as the MP. I mean, we're in Sutton in Ashfield. I've seen this happen for 40 years here, that Westminster sends their people. So it doesn't matter if it's an all-woman or all-man shortlist. The political party will make sure they get what they want.
Hello, I'm sat here, Lisa. I wasn't parachuted in.
No.
Andy, over to you.
I don't agree with all women shortlists. I think they're fundamentally flawed because, like Lisa said, they'll get who they want, really, particularly in certain parties coming up to elections. They want to have their central HQ candidates in key seats, like Ashfield and these kind of red wall seats that both parties want to have. But I think there is a place, like Edwina said, actually, to ensure that there is at least half women, half men, or if you're going on a racial kind of thing, if there's half BAME, half white, I think there is that space to increase that kind of demographic in Parliament because it's needed, or at least it has been needed historically.
So Matthew, that's 3-1 against. If I was
it's
counted...
GB News, I'm used to it. But I mean, seriously, Lee. I mean, you work for an MP here who works for GB News, who was selected by an all-women shortlist and did a great job representing Ashfield, and we campaigned for her together.
They would all make great MPs. Why don't you stand? Why don't you stand?
Why? Lisa wants to smash the system.
Yes, exactly. I don't want this.
You can't smash the system by sitting on a bar stool.
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, you can do a lot by sitting on a bar stool. But no, being a member of Parliament would not be my...
If you want the best people in Parliament, and you look at the ones that are there now, and that applies whatever your political party is, and you think, do you know what, I could do at least a good job, you may well be right.
Yeah.
In which case, put yourself forward. Start off perhaps in local government, stand for the council, learn how to run things locally. Absolutely. It's not as easy as it looks from sitting on a bar stool, but by golly, it's a hell of a lot more worthwhile.
Well, look, Edwina, next year we should have a general election, maybe by the end of the year, almost definitely. And the Labour Party are 20 points ahead in the polls. They seem to think they've got it in the bag. The thing that concerns me, if they do get the keys to number 10, is momentum. They're bubbling along under the surface. We've got some trade unions who are making some nasty noises at the moment, your Mick Lynch's of this world. Is it a problem? Are they still there? And will they influence the Labour Party once they get in?
Of course they're still there. Of course they're still there. What you believe doesn't change, especially very deeply held beliefs, even if they're complete nonsense, even if they are actually against the welfare of the whole nation, as obviously Momentum is. But I grew up in Liverpool. I mean, Momentum by another name was there. Militant, it was called. Militant. I went to school with people like Derek Hatton. And you'll get a mixture of people. You get people who are very sincere and really do believe all the Marxism and all the other rubbish. And you'll get some who piggyback on that, who see opportunities for power. And when you see both of those sprinkled through the current benches of the Labour Party, if they get into any form of power, they're going to be very dangerous for our country. Because what they will do is give in to every strike that's going. They will give in to the railwaymen, they'll give in to the doctors, they'll give in to the teachers. Inflation then becomes rampant. And we know this because it's happened before. And then you find that the people who are most disadvantaged are the poorest in society. That's
Matthew,
what would happen.
Rampant inflation.
Well, we didn't have that in the 13 years of the Labour government that we had. And instead, we've had 13 years of failure. I mean, Edwina, you're doing a great job. You're on the left of the Tory party, and you must be embarrassed by the shower that we've got at the moment and how they're behaving. So, no, I mean, look, what's happened inside the Labour membership is that a lot of members have left. Over 150,000 people have left. About 100,000 new people have joined. Keir Starmer has taken an iron grip, which I think might actually be a point of contention amongst with certain people in the trade unions, an iron grip on the selection procedures so that the next generation of MPs who will be coming in the election, even in seats that Labour only has a 50-50 chance of winning, will be in the Starmer mould. And so Momentum has no power. It loses elections internally all the time. Of course, there are always a few people from the traditional left in the Labour Party, just as there are people on the far right of the Tories.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you bring up Mick Lynch. He's not affiliated to the Labour Party.
Exactly.
The RMT is not affiliated to the Labour Party. They haven't been since, the late 80s, early 90s. You know, they actually
But you
supported a
see
different
Labour
political
MPs
party.
on the picket lines with them.
Yeah, in solidarity to him. You know, I think it's actually, if you're worried about the leadership, Keir Starmer stopped any of his front bench going out on the picket lines. So I think if you're looking at that as a point of contention, that's not real. If you look at the internally elected democratic committees in the Labour Party, the NEC, the National Policy Forum, the Young Labour, the Labour Students, they're all to Keir Starmer's mould, the Labour to Win faction, not the Momentum faction. So you're just lying. They're not
You're
lying.
Oh, I mean, listen, I don't think the Labour Party is. My interest in politics has always been about working class politics, working class representation, working class people's lives being worth as much as anybody else's. Now
that's what the Labour Party's there for, Lisa.
No, it's not.
Look at Angela Rayner.
No. The
Exactly.
Labour Party has not been for working class people since, I don't know, the early 1970s. The Labour Party.
Say that to the millions who benefit from the minimum wage, which the Tories opposed, which Edwina opposed in Parliament.
The minimum wage was actually a cop-out because what it did is it stagnated wages for about 15 years. So the minimum wage was Tony Blair's way of keeping Labour cheap. So, you know, let's not have nostalgia about the Labour Party.
See, Matthew, you're upsetting anarchists now, aren't you? Edwina, over to you.
That's my role.
They're splitting hairs, and that's because they're sitting on the bar stools at the bar. That's what you do when you sit like that, and you're not getting really involved. At local level, for example, in constituencies like mine in High Peak, we can see the very left wing of the Labour Party very much active. I take what you say about the NEC and the higher levels of the Labour Party haven't been taken over by Keir Starmer, but at local level they are still there. They're still there. They are choosing candidates. They're the ones that go out door knocking. They're the ones who made sure, for example, that I didn't get elected to the county council when I stood a couple of years ago, that sort of thing. And that's also where you get that flicker of anti-Semitism and nastiness that has had to be clamped on very, very hard. It's just under the surface. Go and have a look at some of the people who went on the marches recently.
There were certainly people who needed to be to leave the party, and they've left the party. Keir's been absolutely firm and clear.
But they've not left the party, though, Matthew.
They have.
Jeremy Corbyn's
Look at the
not
list
the
of
party.
people who've literally been thrown
No,
out.
they haven't not left. They're still party members.
No. A lot of people have anybody who's all the cases have been processed, and anybody who should have left has left. I mean, you just ask our Jewish comrades who were unhappy, quite rightly unhappy during Jeremy's leadership. Now think that Keir's done absolutely the right thing, and it's the Jewish Labour movement that I listen to on these issues.
The Labour Party and actually most of the trade unions now are full of sort of middle-class bourgeois left.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, not all of them.
Not
all of them, but actually, I mean, even Mick Lynch, they asked him whether someone who earns £100,000 and got £1 million mortgage, are they working class? Mick Lynch said yes. So I don't know I don't know what is going on in the TUC, in the Labour movement and in the trade unions, but I know not one of them talks the language of class for me.
I know.
I think we'll end it on that note because that's a good point, Lisa. I actually agree with you. But Edwina, thanks for that. Guys at the bar, Lisa, Matthew and Andy, thanks for that. It's been a brilliant debate. More from Edwina Curry shortly, but first we're going to talk to Emily Barley about the heartbreaking story of the loss of her baby back in 2022.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining me now is Emily Barley, who sadly lost her baby Beatrice in May 2022. I know Barnsley Hospital have apologised for failures. But Emily, tell us what happened.
Yeah, I think often when a baby dies, people have an impression as though it's a chaotic environment and something terrible happens all at once, and maybe staff that are overworked and, you know, make human mistakes. That's not what happened to us. What happened to us is that I was ignored for hours, hour after hour after hour. I was dismissed as though I was being a dramatic first-time mum. When I was raising concerns because my labour wasn't normal, midwives were rolling their eyes, shrugging their shoulders, turning away, just not listening, which meant that some really, really important red flags were missed. And then as my labour went on, monitoring of Beatrice's heart showed that she was struggling, and then it showed that she was dying, and nobody did anything about it. It was as though they were fixed in this opinion that everything was fine and I was just being dramatic, even when the evidence was showing it really wasn't okay. And in the end, that meant that when we should have been rushed to theatre for an emergency caesarean, instead that didn't happen. And I had 3 midwives and 2 doctors in the room, standing around doing nothing. Just a few minutes before they found that Beatrice had died, the consultant obstetrician was laughing.
I guess going through that, you must have felt helpless.
Yeah. I mean, being in labour and having a baby is such a vulnerable time anyway. And to be asking for help and not getting any and nobody listening. I had my mum with me there as my birthing partner. She was brilliant. She was not just asking, she was telling, demanding, shouting in the end. And just being ignored. You really are just in their hands and there's nothing that you can do.
Emily, what do you want to happen now? I know you've got a campaign going. What's your end goal?
So I've joined together with a load of other bereaved families from all over the country, because my case is what happened to me and Beatrice is far from unique. It's happening everywhere, all around the country. So we've joined together to call for a statutory national public inquiry to really understand not just why this is happening, but why it keeps on happening. After all the local investigations and all the national schemes and everything else that's been tried, it's just not working. And now, pretty much every day of the year, a baby dies because of negligence in the NHS.
And when you're going through that difficult labour and you're making these observations, these complaints, why don't they listen to you, Emily? Do they know better?
I think part of it is that they do think they know better, but there's a real culture of complacency, a culture of not listening to mums. I think as well a culture of not really caring, and that's not just among clinicians, that's all the way up the chain through the NHS. Chief executives of hospitals, people at NHS England, people at CQC, they kind of tolerate this. They think it's normal, like babies just die sometimes, and they don't.
But let's be clear, Emily. I mean, most people that work within the NHS are good, decent, hard-working people. They save lots of lives every day, and we never see the headlines that Kingsmore Hospital saves a life. But when we hear the tragic, heartbreaking stories like this, it brings it home, because I'm actually dealing with a case not too dissimilar to this in my constituency, where negligence, I think negligence, has cost a couple of parents their baby's life. And this is critical, really, because for pregnant women, for new mothers, for new fathers, this is where life starts. And I think sometimes maybe that the maternity department at hospitals, because you see that many babies being born, it's like, it can be like a production line, can't it? And they should have picked those signs up, surely.
Yeah, I think they do often treat labour as though it's normal, there's nothing to see here, no problem. But it's actually, you know, being born is one of the most dangerous, riskiest times of anybody's life. And in the past, you know, before modern medicine, loads more babies died. And we shouldn't be expecting babies to die now, we should be expecting them to live. But instead, there is this culture of complacency, there's a culture of not listening, and it doesn't just result in deaths of babies. Every year, hundreds more babies are brain damaged because of negligence. Mums suffer horrible physical injuries, and I think actually a lot of mums, when you speak to them, they might have come through labour and birth relatively okay and their baby's okay, but they didn't have a good experience and they weren't treated well.
So this campaign that you've got going at the moment, how do people get involved with that campaign?
We're called the Maternity Safety Alliance. Find us online. You can help us by pledging your support, writing to your MP.
Have you wrote to your MP?
Yes.
Are you getting plenty of support?
I am from my MP.
Okay, that's good news.
We've written to the government as well, and so far we've been ignored. Coming up on 2 months now and not a single response.
Okay, so I guess what you need to do is call your MP again, even write to me. I can take that up for you as well, even though you're not my constituent, I'll definitely do that for you. So if you've got one final message for the, I'm not having got the staff at the NHS because they're brilliant, but the actual managers, the trust managers, the directors, the people on these huge salaries, what would your message be to them?
You need to get a grip of this. Babies dying is not normal, it's not okay, and you can't just keep on accepting it.
Emily, thank you for sharing your story. Thanks, darling.
Thank you.
Next, Edwina Curry returns as she's going to be taking some questions from the good people of Ashfield.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
So we've got all my guests on the stage now, it's great. We've got Edwina, we've got Lisa, we've got Andy, and we've got Matthew. We're going to talk about real poverty. Now, we can speak about back in the day what poverty was really like growing up in a place like Ashfield. Lisa knows that, and Andy knows that. But I remember back in the day where we didn't have much money. We didn't rely on food banks. You know, a lot of people grew vegetables, had allotments, relied on that as our top-up for our parents' income. So we didn't consider ourselves being in real poverty. I can remember clothes. We used to buy clothes. My mother's here. Used to buy clothes from the catalogue, pay about 70 pence a week for a new jumper. I think the order cost about 2 weeks, Andy, that jumper there. Matthew, let's go to you first. Real poverty.
Yeah, I mean, look, real poverty does exist in the country, and it has got worse under the 13 years of this Tory government, Lee. And you, as you well know, of course we can discuss real poverty. Is real poverty not having Netflix? No. Is real poverty not having a TV and having the basic amenities of life that people can expect in this day and age? Then yes, so of course, it's the definition of what real poverty is changes as the country's got richer. But of course it exists, and it's got worse.
Edwina.
Yeah, well, I think many older people remember when, for example, you'd wake up in the morning and there'd be ice on the inside of the window pane in your bedroom. And you didn't know what a duvet was, or no such things.
It was a continental quilt, do you remember?
Well, that was it. I mean, I'm not.
Hang on a minute. Your name's not Edwina.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And we used to get the stuff that used to come from Canada, had cousins in Canada, and they would send a whole box of hand-me-downs, and that's what I get to wear. And wrapped inside it would be bits of chocolate and stuff, because we had rationing till I was 9 years old. So older people really, we're not dismissive of the problems that people have today, but we have experienced far more. And Lee is quite right that actually it's often relative. It's what you get and what you've got compared with other people. To me, real poverty is something quite different. Real poverty is when there's no dad there, when the family, the dad's gone. The moment the baby has arrived, he's off. The women are left on their own with the children and having to struggle. Real poverty is when those kids are going to school and there's not a normal family life there, and they find that really, really tough. Real poverty is the sort of story that you hear from kids in care.
Lisa,
that's real.
You
That's
grew up in
real
this area alongside me.
Yes, I did, yeah. And when I grew up, I grew up in the 70s. We had ice on the inside of our windows. I lived in a council house on...
Ours was worse than yours.
My granddad, I lived with my grandma and granddad, and my granddad worked down the pit, and he was digging coal, and I still lived in a freezing cold house. In fact, my overarching...
They had free coal.
What, free?
Yeah, they had free coal.
They were digging it. They were going underground. And
my miners had free coal.
And it wasn't free coal. It was part of their wage.
It was a concession.
It was part of their wage. But, you've got poverty. So you've got absolute poverty. That means when people die from their poverty. And then you've got relative poverty, which is about how you measure people, in relative. And for me, poverty should be defined as people should have a life lived with dignity. And if that dignity is taken away from them, either through debt or not having enough food, or your kids being sent to school not with enough stuff, whether it's food or clothing or whatever, that's not living a life with dignity. So for me, if you're not living a life with dignity, you live in poverty.
So I guess there was plenty of poor people back in the day when Edwina was growing up, and definitely my mother, back in the 40s and 50s, they had no money at all, but they lived a dignified life. Andy?
Yeah, I grew up in Mansfield, in a different day to you.
In that jumper?
In this jumper. No, this is 2017 Next's finest Christmas line. I don't know why you're giving it so much hate. It's beautiful. No, I grew up in Mansfield. I didn't grow up in Sutton or Ashfield, but I grew up in a bit of a different time. But Edwina talks about people freezing in their homes in the 70s and 80s, and a little bit earlier, I think.
No, it was earlier.
A bit earlier. I would never assume. But looking at that time, but technology has advanced. Why are people still freezing in their homes now? And we've got all of the advancements, even just looking at the different glazes of windows, you've got different types of central heating. You've had such technological advance, yet people are still living in similar ways.
In fact, I was going to hold you there, Andy, because somebody in the audience is shouting out. We've got a lady here who wants to talk about poverty.
Yeah, I've lived in this area for 30 years now. I grew up in Derbyshire. And, I've got a friend that runs a local pub in Selston, the Railway Inn, and they're certainly not seeing poverty. If there's a difference between being poor and not having money. You can be poor and still go out and enjoy yourself. The real people at the bottom end of the line that are suffering from poverty aren't coming to venues like this or going to the local chippy. Leo know our local chippy's packed. Every Friday night, they're queuing down the streets. That's not poverty. So when people talk about poverty, they need to think about, well, do I need that or do I want that? There's a difference.
She's actually right, though, because we talk about poverty, but the takeaways, the chip shops, the McDonald's, the KFCs, they're...
Well, it's because they're cheaper alternatives.
Well, they're not cheap.
McDonald's, you can get a full meal for $3.99. That is objectively a cheaper alternative.
Well, let's talk about food poverty. Let's talk about obesity. We talk about the junk food that's readily available now, the fast food places. We're saying... We're telling people that half the country's in poverty, our kids are starving, yet in the next breath, the same people are saying that we've got an obesity crisis. And we have got an obesity crisis. How does that work, Edwina? You're a former health minister.
How does it work? It works from people eating too much. It's as simple as that. And I can say that with a bit of a smile, because I'm the only one at this table that's got a diet drink on it. And that's because yesterday I went to the Slimming Club, and by God, it's still with me. I've got to be careful. Oh, my God. It matters. As a former health minister, we used to campaign on all this stuff. I wish health ministers did that rather more. Yeah. That they would say to people, live your life to the full, enjoy yourself. But if you're going to eat a lot, you've got to walk a lot, you've got to exercise, you've got to get out. That's what you teach your kids. Eat some fruit, get some vegetables, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Live a balanced life, and you will live a healthy life.
Matty, I'm going to come to you. I'm not having this nonsense about junk food is cheaper than fresh food, because it's not. We proved that in an experiment a couple of years back by getting fresh ingredients with the chef and with children in the food bank. We was making meals. I've got the tab 30p Lee, but we made 172 meals for 50 quid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was a very controversial intervention, but you're right. I mean, one of the things that we don't do in schools now is we don't teach people how to cook. It's a subject that's fallen off the end of the school curriculum, and it shouldn't have done so, because it is obviously cheaper to make your own meals than go to McDonald's or to the chippy. But that's not to say that people shouldn't be able to go to McDonald's now and then, even if they're not very well off, because kids need to, experience what other kids are experiencing. But yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of taking responsibility for yourself and the government taking action. And you need both. It's not an and/or situation.
Sorry, guys, we've got somebody behind the bar, the lovely Zoe. She wants to ask a question. Zoe?
Well, I'd just like to pick up on the point of the obesity crisis, and the biggest problem that we've got within the NHS is the food pyramid. It's upside down. What they're telling you to stay away from, what's causing the weight gain, is the amount of carbohydrates they're recommending daily. And if you turn that upside down and eat what they're telling you to stay away from, solved.
They are lecture on keto.
Absolutely.
Is she right, Matthew?
Well, as we know lots of people like Gloria, who used to be the MP here, who thrive on keto. I don't do it because it's...
Obviously.
Thank you very much. Oh, Lee! Now I'm going to ask you nasty questions when in the yes/no quiz. Look, I think it's about people taking responsibility for themselves and the government making sensible policy decisions, but you can't have one without the other.
But that's exactly the sort of line that I was taking, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
all those years ago.
But can I...
And you were brave doing it. You got a lot of abuse for it.
But can we also just put a spotlight on the food producers as well, who are...
Force us to eat all this food.
No, they're
It's
banging
rubbish.
in sugars.
You don't have to eat it. Nobody makes
When
you.
it's the cheapest alternative.
Do you know what?
I'm sure on your MP's pension you can afford whatever you'd like. You get to go to the Waitrose in Buxton on your pension. But for a lot of people, the worst food is the cheapest.
Yeah, can I speak? Listen.
It's that jumper, it's gone to his head.
I know. So George Orwell in 1984 wrote about miners' food. And the Daily Mail in 1934, I think it was, criticised what coal miners were eating, because they said that coal miners were having too much fuel on their fire and they were putting too much sugar in the tea.
It's about 70 years ago.
Yes, and you know what? It's still. Well, I'll tell you what. Well, let me speak, and I'll answer that.
Nobody's forcing you to eat the sugar.
So what George Orwell says is, if you were a miner and you've been down the pit all day, when you come home at night, shouldn't you have something warm and sweet?
Yeah.
And you know what? If you're sat in
and that's why they had no teeth, Lisa.
Well, no, that's not true. That's not true.
It is true.
People need to fit. Don't you think that I'm not?
Where are your teeth?
Listen,
I'm not saying.
But food is not a reward. Food is a fuel.
But people treat it as a reward.
Well,
and we've got big companies. We've got big companies that are banging sugar in everything, are putting...
It's quite patronising, Edwina.
Why? What is she saying?
Well, she's giggling away into the camera. I think that's quite patronising.
What am I doing? I'm so sorry. I'm trying not to say...
Look, guys, I think we need to calm down a little bit now.
Why? What are you saying?
Security are in the building. They may have to come to stage. It's a fascinating discussion. But thanks, Edwina. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Matthew.
So this is the festive treat, not just for me, but for you at home as well, where I get to turn the tables on Lee and his infamous yes/no quiz. He's the one who's going to be doing the answering, and I'm not left in the corner for once. So remember the rules, Lee. 5 questions, yes/no answers, and you're only able to qualify one of your answers. So let's kick off with, do you think the gap is too big between rich and poor?
No.
I was going to say, if I was that slow, you'd kill me. Do you think Mrs Thatcher is a heroine?
Yes.
Do you support Keir Starmer's plan to use terror legislation to stop the small boats gangs, to smash the small boats gangs?
Yes.
And will Parliament only be truly representative of the country when it's 50% female?
No.
And finally, we're speaking just after Christmas, did you do your fair share of the cooking, cleaning and other housework over the festive period?
Yes.
Were your fingers crossed for that one? And so which one would you like to qualify?
Well, all of them, really, but I can only go back to one about being representative in Parliament. Yeah. If it's 50-50, it can't be representative because 52% of the population is women. Simple as that.
Oh, technicality, Lee.
Well, there you go. Next, it's time for last orders. And on the poll with trade unionist Andy MacDonald, Lisa McKenzie, and the pub landlord, he's back, Gary Melvin.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So back in the day, in the pubs around Ashfield and Nottinghamshire, going back to the 70s, 80s and even early 90s, every Saturday night, the cockle man would come in the pub with his big tray with salt, vinegar, cockles, whelks, mussels and crab sticks. So I'm delighted to be joined by one of the last few remaining cockle sellers. This is Dave Bartram. Nice to meet you, Dave. Thanks for
Very
coming
nice to meet you.
So I believe you've been at this game for 50 years.
Yes, I've done... I'm in my 63rd year.
63rd year. So how often... We don't see the cockle men very often now in the pub, not in Ashfield. Are you still out and about in Nottingham?
I beat up. Now, I want somebody... I'm still doing it with big shows. You know, people that want little parties or something.
Yeah.
I make the stuff for them and they go to the party.
Okay.
But all I want is somebody willing to carry a basket to carry it on.
Can you make a living at it?
Well, I worked for Harry Tenby to start with, Tenby Seafood it was. Then he went to Spain. And me and my late wife carried it on. I mean, when I started with Harry, all he did was give me a basket.
Okay.
You find your own pubs. So I found all the pubs in Nottingham. And then when I started on my own, me and the wife did a year on our own. And then we got more pubs. So we started in, you know, I had 7 staff, 250 pubs in a big Americana by the time I'd done.
So on a Saturday night, we used to look forward to 2 things in the pub, apart from obviously boozing and yeah, chatting to your mates. But there were 2 good things in Nottinghamshire back in the day was used to come around with the football post.
Yeah, oh, yes.
The paper with all the football results in.
Yeah.
Look forward to. I used to print it the same day, actually. Just an hour after the final results go in, you're reading the paper. And the cockle man used to come in, but that's disappeared, hasn't it, Dave? And it's, I'd like to see it come back. Do you think it could make a comeback?
I've got 5 stars on my basket. Now, when I started, to start with, it was Mull and White pub. They used to say yes or no. And you went in and carried on from there. Then dawn would come. And then food come, you know?
Yeah.
And it knocked it back.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do a lot that still do food.
Yeah.
They still let me in.
Yep.
You know, because I was there first.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the Trip, the Castle,
Yep.
the Angel, that's just a few.
Wow. So I like my mussels, I like my cockles, but the only place we tend to get them nowadays is when you go to Skegness for a day, or up to Cleethorpes, or to Blackpool. I like them to be fresh.
Oh,
yeah. I don't like them to be pickled as such, but I do like them.
Now that is one thing. I won't eat them pickled anyway. I have
been pickled when I've had them. I've had a few. But,
obviously.
Yeah.
But, no, mine's fresh.
Yeah.
I pack, same day deliver.
Yep. Well, listen, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you, Dave. 60-odd years out with your basket, selling cockles and mussels and crab sticks and everything.
I've been on stage with Johnny Vegas dressed as a woman.
Wow.
He loves his prawns.
Yeah, yeah, prawns as well, yeah.
And I tell you what, I miss it. I miss it. I still go around my village, you know.
And it's good for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dave, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Yeah.
That's Dave Bartram, 60-odd years selling cockles, mussels, prawns and whelks.
Yeah, whelks are the worst. They go off fast.
Fast. They go off fast, remember that.
They do go off fast.
So it's time for On the Pull. Got Gary, the brilliant landlord. I've got Lisa, she's on the pull. And I've got Andy, he's on the pull. I've got to apologise for last week's pathetic performance. I poured a pint of froth. It's not as easy as it looks, Andy. Lisa's good in there. I know she used to work in a bar about 1 million years ago.
All right, thanks.
It's true, it's about 1 million years ago. So you've got your pump, you've got your pint pot. Yeah. We've got an anarchist and we've got a socialist. Go for it. So that's a pretty good start, Andy. Oh, Lisa's making a mess of it.
Hey up.
How long did you work in a pub for, Lisa?
Not long.
I can tell by that pint you poured. Oh, it's a shocker.
Oh,
dear.
Hang on, leave
Andy,
it.
On the bar.
Look at that.
Well, I'll give you...
Leave it to settle.
Well, Gary, you're a potential employee of
Indeed, yeah.
They're coming for an interview.
Indeed.
Right, they've just poured a pint like that.
Yeah.
I mean, be honest. What would you say to Lisa?
I'd say, Lisa, come back when you're ready.
Yeah.
It's a good job I've got a PhD
no idea.
there.
A PhD in pint pulling?
No.
OK, what about your PhD? Is that in pint pulling, Andy?
It may well be at that. What do you think of that?
All right, no, you've done a good job there, mate. I'll give you that.
So, what's out of 10 for Lisa?
Lisa, that's got to be a 3.
Well, that's one more than you gave me, Gary, isn't it?
Well, indeed. At least there's some beer there.
OK.
Yours was just froth.
OK, I'm the comedian, not you. And, who's the... what about Andy?
That's got to be... I'm going to give him 10.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you might think that's good news.
That's pretty good. Well, you got, what, -2?
We've actually got somebody who got 11.5.
Who got that?
Yeah, well, never you mind. So, but anyway, that's been absolutely brilliant, Gary. Thanks once again for allowing us in this fabulous Golden Diamonds Club.
It's been a pleasure.
In Ashfield.
Enjoyed every minute of it.
700 members, best music venue in the East Midlands, the Cavern of the North. We've got brilliant Lisa's first time on the show. You've been brilliant.
Thank you.
I don't believe a word of what Andy says about you. But it's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks, darling. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great show. Once again, another massive thanks to June and Gary Melvin here at the world-famous Golden Diamond Club in Sutton in Ashfield. A fantastic show, fantastic guests. Listen, have a happy new year.
The silver button's going right down her back. I said hi-ho, a tipsy toe. She broke a needle and she can't sew. Walking the dog. I'm just still walking the dog. Well, if you don't know how to do it, show you how to walk that dog. Yeah, I got some mother for the 56. chance of seeing an elephant, he jumped the fence. He jumped so high that he's touching the sky. Didn't get back till the 4th of July. Walking the dog, walking that dog. Well, if you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk that dog. Just a walking, just a walking, just a walking. Yeah, babe, I'm just a walking. Well, if you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk that dog. Rock on, rock on.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. There will be some frost around tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in time for the weekend. That's in association with a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. This will sweep its way in across the UK as we go through the next 24 hours or so. Ahead of that, some quieter weather for a time as many of the daytime showers ease and clear away, leaving some clear skies for many, but a very wet and windy picture towards the far northeast of Scotland tonight. Under the clear skies, particularly towards eastern parts, likely to turn quite chilly, a touch of frost in the south, a widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way in, pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we are likely to see some significant snow, could see more than 10 centimetres in some places over the higher ground, could cause some travel disruption here. Elsewhere, an unsettled picture, but quite mild towards the south, highs of around 12 Celsius. Looking ahead towards New Year's Eve, and for many it is going to be a blustery day. Strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here. Quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland. Some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need